In the 14th century, the history of the Assyrian people took an abrupt turn. Tamerlane inspired massive persecution of the Christians in the east. The patriarch of the Assyrian church was forced to leave with all his people to Mosul in northern Iran, and then later to the mountains of Iranian Kurdistan. This became the Assyrian homeland for centuries. There were occasional travelers that managed to reach these inaccessible mountains in Iranian Kurdistan and eastern Turkey, where Assyrians had lived in exclusion for over 100 years. It was written in scientific magazines and secret intelligence reports. Assyrians, the remainder of the people that used to populate the whole territory of Assyria, remain in small numbers between the Mosul and Jul-America and neighboring countries to the west, out to Sirt and to Lake Urmia to the east. At one time they used to be a majority of the local population, but gradually they drifted apart and left for other countries. There are only a few left among the Kurds. They kept their ancient culture, and unlike the Kurds, they live in good houses, spacious and clean. Their women have full freedom at home. They have become less hostile over time, living in exclusion. They are brave and enterprising and capable of learning. They are easily able to adapt themselves to European cultures and languages. Assyrians suffered much for the religion, for which they are very attached to. All the rituals and ceremonies are accurately followed. The cross is the only image. They have great respect for it. There are no icons. They dress in clothes often with crosses on them. They are fanatical, especially in the mountains. Missionaries are not looked upon favorably. Beginning from the end of the 16th century, missionaries of different denominations from Europe and later from America became very active among the Assyrians of the Ottoman Empire. The political situation in Mesopotamia played a leading role in the appearance of the missionaries of various denominations amongst the Assyrian people. They unfortunately took advantage of the fact that Assyrians were in a very bad state. The Russian Orthodox Church was one of the last denominations to open its missions in Urmia at the end of the last century. Nevertheless, Assyrians were drawn especially to the Russian Orthodox Church and Russia in general, as they saw in Russians fellow believers. In the beginning of the 19th century, Russia won from the Persians and Turks the main part of Armenia and Georgia. Thereafter, Russia came into immediate contact with the Assyrians, who immediately took Russia's side. Assyrians were always trying to get away from the antagonistic Muslim surroundings and saw Russians as their only hope. Mikhail Sado, professor of the St. Petersburg Spiritual Academy. Assyrian Christians helped the Russians, serving as guides, providing the Russian army with forage for their horses and food beginning from the 18th century. And as a result, 100 Assyrian families were granted the right to live in Russia, especially as Russia from the middle of the 19th century had changed its orientation from west to east. Christians were to be the first allies in Russia's advance towards the Caucasus and the Middle East. Through the rest of the 19th century, Assyrians of Urmia and Kurdistan were endlessly trying to become integrated with Russian Orthodox Church. However, Russia didn't want to break relations with Turkey for strategic reasons. Nonetheless, at the end of the 19th century, some of the Assyrian people were officially united with Russian Orthodoxy. In 1918, in St. Petersburg, the Act of Unification was signed, allowing for some Assyrians of Persia to be united to the Russian Orthodox Church. On March 25, 1898, in the Troitsky Cathedral in St. Petersburg, a delegation of Syro-Chaldeans, headed by the Supreme Bishop Mar Iona, met with the representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church to unite their congregation with Russian Orthodoxy. At 9:30 a.m. on that fateful day, the head of the Russian Church entered into the cathedral with the Assyrian bishop. The head of the Russian Church then asked him,
главу
"Are you ready to choose the Orthodox faith?" And the bishop replied, "Yes, we are."
Хочешь ли отречься от ереси? На что епископ ответил: хочешь.
Immediately after that, the Persian town of Urmia was opened to an Orthodox mission. Thousands of Assyrians were taught in the mission schools. By 1914, the Assyrian Orthodox community was by far the biggest in the region. Even the militant mountain Assyrians, headed by the Patriarch, gave their approval to assimilate. They were forced into allegiance, as they felt that this was a good way to prevent their immediate genocide from the Turks. Here we are again, in the year 1914, that fateful year for the Assyrians. Once again, history had tried to test that long-suffering nation, and once again they survived these bloody and often merciless times. The people have long learned to withstand hardships. When the Sumerian and Akkad empires just came into existence, people came from the North Flood and created Assyria on the north and Babylon on the south. Again, hundreds of years passed. Assyria had formed itself into a strong state. Across the lands, the word spread that Assyrians were the most brave and fearless warriors. A power that nobody could match. At the peak of its power, territory of the Assyrian Empire spread from Egypt to the Mediterranean and Black Sea, and from the Caucasus to northern India. But every success story has an end. Unable to control such a massive empire, endless warfare had exhausted and weakened Assyria. In the year 1612 BC, Nineveh fell victim to a temporary alliance between the Babylonians and the Medians. Assyrians lost their state and were unable to recover. There was nothing to prevent Assyrians from being dissolved into the different peoples of the various nations of history. There would have been nothing left of them if not for the Christian faith that separated them from the surrounding nations. Since ancient times, Assyrians lived in clans that joined into the Asherites, headed by the Malik. They all complied with the Patriarch. Since the 16th century, the right to be the leader of the nation belonged to the one clan, as legend had it, that made its beginnings from Saint Simon, Christ's brother. In 1903, 17-year-old Mar Shimun Benjamin was chosen to be the Patriarch of the Assyrians. He was the one to take his people through all the hardships that the Assyrian nation had suffered since the beginning of the 20th century. Turks never before involved themselves in the life of the mountain Assyrians. They only collected very nominal taxes. However, when power passed to the radical young Turkish party that had started the pan-Turkish policy of unification of all the Turkish people under the aegis of Turkey,